Hello, folks. Welcome to Totally Tanked, the tankiest podcast in Tankville. It's Saturday, October 12th, 2024, and this is episode 63. My name is Rob, and I'm joined by...
Hello, I'm John, and welcome to the Tanktainment Answer to Wayne's World. Now, folks, if you're watching, if you want an excellent Totally Tanked t-shirt, a beer coaster, a coffee mug, or a cool hat, head over to redbubble.com and search for Totally Tanked. Also, if you could like and subscribe, and hell, even share this stream, that would all be very helpful to us.
Let us know if there's any issues with the sound quality, video, or anything else like that.
I mean, the sound's looking fantastic here, but I'd love to hear if it's otherwise.
First off, I'd just like to dedicate today's episode to my wonderful father, Harry, who passed away shortly after last month's episode. So thanks, Dad. You're wonderful.
Yeah, you've had a rough year, Rob, but yeah.
Anyway, today we're talking about the Tiger II, the Konigstiger, the King Tiger, the Royal Tiger, the Panzerkampfwagen Tiger Aufs B, the Tiger B, the, you can do this one,
Sonderkraftfahrzeug, or SDKFZ 182. It's slowly listed as the Panzer 6, the same as the Tiger 1.
There was also the VK403H, or the Tiger 3, because the VK4502H was originally going to be the Tiger 2. Or on first view by the Allies, it was the Pan Tiger, the Panther Tiger. And the Canadians came up with their own version of the Tiger Rex, and some German crews called it the Slug or Schnecki because it was so slow.
Just quickly before we go on, so we got the our friends here, Brett Parker from Brisbane, Tasman's joining us from Sydney. Our good friend Alan is with us from Idaho, I believe. Brandon is with us from wherever he may be found. Okay, and Tasman says he liked the name Royal Tiger, which it has its place. I thought when I came into this that the conventional wisdom that the Tiger II was just an oversized, kind of useless waste of resources, and the more I dug into it, the more I came to quite different conclusions. So,
are you trying to influence the poll right now?
Well, I'm not.
But we are.
Yes.
So feel free to go and vote as many times.
So the options we've got are waste of resources or a good idea for a bad situation, which is a theme we will explore later. But Rob, do you want to give us them stats?
Oh, the stats. Type, heavy tank. What a surprise. It's pretty heavy. Place of origin, Nazi Germany. Service, 44 to 45. Start of design, basically the proper finalized designs came up in 43 by Henschel and Krupp. Henschel doing the chassis and Krupp doing the turret.
Do you want to talk about the turrets now?
No.
Okay.
Unit cost 321,000 Reichmarks. It was very expensive, twice as expensive as anything else they were building at the time. And produced, as we said, 44 to 45. They only built 492. What a surprise. There were reasons for that we'll get into. Mass, 68.5 tons or 69 and a bit tons with the production turret and bits of tracks stuck to the outside and ammo and everything else. Length, 7.38 meters, width, 3.7 meters, and height, 3.09 meters. Crew of 5, commander, gunner, loader, radio operator, and driver. Armour, this is the big part of it. So it starts off with, the main thing is 150 mils of armour on the front glasses, sloped back at, I think, 45 degrees. It makes it nice and thick. And then 150...
They really got into sloped armour later in the war, didn't they?
Well, they knew it was available. It was just thinking, well, what are we up against and what are we doing? And then 185 mils of sloped armour on the turret, but it was only 10 mil slope. 10 degrees slope, so not very much. Now, the main reason for it, the main armament of the 88 millimeter KWK 43 with the L71. L71, yeah, it was nice. It was nice. It was the long barrel. It was the big projectile 88 mil gun, the anti-aircraft gun put in there.
I mean, it was an 88, but at this point, this gun, I don't think it's not ammunition compatible with the anti-air 88.
Oh, they were given it when they ran out of ammo. They were given 88 mil flak rounds.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah, no, not very well.
Yeah, no.
They could fire them. But yeah,
it was an interesting thing where the Germans just thought, and I think they had some good evidence for this, that the 88mm was as big as a World War II tank needed the gun to be, and getting more velocity out of the round was a more useful pursuit beyond that. And compare that, obviously, the Soviet IS-2 with its 122mm gun, and that's a different approach.
The HE rounds, the 122 guns were a bit of a different thing to say. Lob it in might be a bit slow, but it's going to pack a lot of explosive when it hits there, or anywhere nearby, as the Tiger II crews found out.
Now, just quickly, want to say hello to Mehdi and Jamie Stokes, who joined us. Love to see you folks again.
We said hello to Brandon Make Stuff.
We said hello to Brandon before, but hello again, Brandon. Yes. Yes. Cool.
All right. 80 to 86 rounds carried in the tank for the 88mm. Armament of secondary armament of two 7.92 MG34 machine guns, carrying about almost 6,000 rounds, plus a turret roof-mounted grenade / smoke / mortar launcher.
There's quite a bit of kit, that little unit, as well.
They carried a lot of rounds for it. They could just throw it out there. So
it only had a range of about 10 meters, and the projectile range was about 10 meters, but then the effective lethal range was about 100 meters.
Yeah.
So it really clinged off the what do they call them? The dogs. It's anyway.
All right. The engine, the V12 Maybach HL 230 petrol engine, 690 horsepower, the same as the Tiger 1 and Panther. That's a bit of a struggle for that poor little engine.
And as we've discussed at length, particularly in the, I believe the
Panther.
This is the Panther episode.
Yeah.
The poor Maybach company was just lied to by the Nazis. Who would have thought Nazis would lie, Rob?
Yeah.
And I think it was the Panther 3 episode where we really talked about the Maybach engines, but they just never got accurate numbers on what was needed from them, and that gave them a great deal of difficulty in servicing the actual demand. With some significant advances heading into the later war engine, it was still very recognisably the same engine throughout.
All right. It had 8 forward and 4 reverse gears of the Maybach transmission, torsion bar suspension, and clear ground clearance of up to half a metre. Fuel could carry 860 litres, which gave it an operational range of 190 k's on road or 120 k's cross country. Now,
which is quite reasonable for
I think that might have been. I think that might be a little bit overestimated. I think they might be looking at the best case scenarios, because
remember, Centurion could only do 30 miles or something like that.
I think it was about 80 k's or 90 k's.
Okay.
Speed on road 38 k's with a max burst speed of about 41, but they usually said it was really, they really only wanted it going at about 30 k's an hour for most travel. So even that 38 k's on road is probably a little bit much. Cross country 15 to 20 k's, or if it went into softer ground, it was only down to about 7 k's, but it was still able to keep going because they have very wide tracks. So even where Shermans and so forth would get bogged down in softer ground, it could keep on going with its wide tracks.
But so it's worth noting here that what we've got here is a tank with a very low geared engine, which they seem to get it right when we get to the reliability numbers, but it all kind of worked, particularly with the wide tracks. The ground pressure for such a big tank was actually quite low.
And even though it was 12 tons heavier than the Tiger 1 and it had the same engines, speed wasn't that much slower than the Tiger 1. So they could maneuver fairly similarly. All right. Design and development. May 41, Hitler said, I want a bigger tank with a long-barreled 88 anti-aircraft gun in it. Thanks very much, because those things rock. Even though the Tiger 1 with its 88mm was not yet in production. So he's already got one designed and on the cards and ready to go, and almost ready to go. You're saying, well, no, I want a bigger one. I want this one.
Look, I think it's fair to say that Tiger 2 was a real evolution of Tiger, but it also represents, because Tiger was built as a breakthrough tank for the assaults, and by the time Tiger 2 got in production, they knew they were fighting a much more defensive war.
Remember, this May 41, he's asking for this. So, one, the Tiger 1's still not in production yet. It's been designed, but it's not in production yet. 2, Operation Barbarossa hasn't happened yet, so they're in control of most of Europe, and allied with the Soviets. There's basically only fighting in Greece and the Balkans and North Africa. I think even Greece has fallen by this stage. So he's just designing this for the next thing. Obviously, he's obviously planning Russia for this at this point in time. But
I mean, it's an interesting point because certainly the way we understand the war, the Russians surprised the Germans with the T-34 and the KV-1, but it feels like someone was expecting something big out there.
Yep. Yeah, it kind of does.
And much bigger than anything the Allies ever fielded.
Yeah. Or he's just wanting to do the next big thing. And so even though he didn't know what he was going to be facing, Hitler was saying, I want the next big thing. All right, so the difference in size between the two rounds, between the Tiger 1 and Tiger 2, is vast, with the Tiger 2 round nearly twice the length and twice the propellant, each round weighing, each full round weighing up to 20 kilos. This gave the round a very high velocity, 1,130 meters per second exiting the barrel versus 780 meters per second for the Tiger 1.
And bear in mind, modern 120 millimeter APF SDS is, I think, getting up around 1,800 meters per second. So, yeah.
There you go. This gave the rounds a very flat trajectory, making it a lot easier to just aim at the target rather than having to lead the target, aiming up if it's going over a certain distance. And so basically you could just point and shoot as opposed to the slower rounds from the Tiger 1, where you had to, as I say, lead the target and go from there.
Yeah, we talked about this in the T62 episode, but it can't be stated enough that higher muzzle velocity, aside from giving you much better penetration with a better round, does simplify the targeting solutions enormously as well. Yeah, because once you have to do a ballistic arc, you're in 3 dimensions, and the target can not be where you're aiming in lots of different ways. Whereas if you're just putting the crosshair on, it's only dropping a meter in flight, then that's a lot easier.
Yeah, because if you're aiming at the middle of a tank from a K away, and it's only dropping a meter, then you're still going to hit the tank in a vulnerable spot, probably.
Yeah.
Like the Tiger, the Nazis went to Porsche and Henschel asking them for designs. Porsche came up with 2 designs, one with a front-mounted turret and one with a rear-mounted turret and a mid-mounted engine. Porsche also wanted to use a petrol-electric engine for the tank, but this proved a bit difficult and nobody really liked it because there was not enough copper, because the U-boats needed all the copper in Germany for their own petrol-electric engines. However, Porsche was pretty confident they would get the order because they missed out on the Tiger 1, so this time's obviously going to be their turn. So they pre-ordered 50 turrets from Krupp for their would-be tank. However, guess what? They didn't get the order, and this time either. So those first 50 turrets were delivered to Henschel to mount on their turret.
I want to talk about this now that we got to the turret bit.
Yes.
Because people talk about the Porsche turrets a lot, and when we did the Can You Guess the Tank for the next episode bit, it was one with what's called the Porsche turret. They were all built by Krupp, both versions of the turret. But it's also worth remembering 50 of them were built with the so-called Porsche turret out of a run of 500. So not insignificant number of these.
Well, not only that, they were built first.
Yeah, they were built first, but both turrets are Tiger 2s. Both of them were used in the war. It's not just a prototype. It's a tenth of the total production. So it's worth remembering that. But yeah.
But however, they were found to be too difficult to build, and the rounded face created the shot trap on the turret. So the remaining turrets built by Krupp were flat slope-sided welded turrets. Now, Krupp, when building the turrets, they had their own 88mm gun. They decided to build their own 88mm long gun rather than use the Rheinmetall version that was being used for anti-aircraft. And they're saying, well, we don't want to use their guns. We want to build and sell our own. So that's what they did. Turret had a hydraulic power traverse that allowed it to rotate quickly and then lay on a target with manual adjustments. So basically, it gave them a very good chance to find a target and aim and shoot. All right. Now, even though the tank was late enough of a design that the MG42 was available for the secondary armament as for the tank, the process to change the barrel of the machine gun inside the tank meant that the MG34, which was the older version, basically designed in 1934, was the preferred version because you could change the barrel over much quicker, much simpler from inside. All right.
Oh.
Like the Tiger 1, it had narrow transport tracks for fitting on trains and metal road and the metal road wheels. Oh, and fitting on trains and going through various tunnels and anything else. And the metal road wheels from the late build Tiger 1s was one of the few interchangeable parts with the Tiger 2, even though the Tiger 2 had a simplified setup of interlocking road wheels rather than the interleaved road wheels of the Tiger 1. It also had a steering wheel like the Tiger 1.
Yeah, and it's well worth noting that by mid-1944, the Germans had decided that they were only going to build 3 armoured vehicles. It's going to be the Hetzer, it was going to be the Panther, and it was going to be Tiger 2. And there was actually a lot of parts commonality between Panther and Tiger 2.
Hetzer or still?
No, Hetzer.
Really?
Yeah. They were shutting down the Panzer III production lines to make Panthers. And and the other thing, as we've discussed in the Hetzer episode, the thing about Hetzer was it could be built in factories that only had 10-ton cranes.
16.
Smaller cranes.
Smaller cranes, not the 25-ton.
Yeah.
They needed for the...
well, to build a Tiger 2, you needed some bigger cranes again.
It was the 25-ton cranes in the Panzer III and 4 factories that they needed, which they didn't have, which is why they could build them in the Hetzer factories, which only had 16-ton cranes. All right. Guess what? Didn't come with a tank telephone.
Disappointing.
Yep, disappointing. And the large size of the tank and the turret meant that it had very poor visibility to the sides and rear with the closed hatches. So that's why you'll see mostly that the commander was sticking his head out, because that way you could actually see all around him. But obviously they were a very good ambush tank, even though the massive size of them, because once they laid on a target with a great big gun, they could just shoot it and bang, it was gone. Future improvements from the overly optimistic Nazis were a more powerful engine, better transmission, a diesel engine, 10.5 centimetre gun, stabilised sights, a stabilised main gun, and an automatic ammunition feed. That would be exciting.
That's quite interesting that they were aiming for a 105mm gun even back then, given how the 105 became such a standard going forward.
Yep. A stereoscopic rangefinder, a heated crew compartment. That sounds pretty nice, doesn't it? Stowage for an additional 12 rounds, an overpressure and air filtration system to protect against poison gas.
That's very advanced.
Yeah.
That's Citadel. NATO didn't do that till the 70s.
They're thinking about it. But they lost or got bombed before being able to introduce any of these ideas.
Yeah, it's definitely worth mentioning again that the factories were very heavily bombed. The Allies definitely made a priority of hitting these places, and they were literally trying to make tanks as the bombs rained down on them.
However, they did make some heavy use of propaganda films of all the King Tigers on parade. But they were, as we'll see here a few times, more times this episode, very heavy on fuel. All right.
One thing with the propaganda films and the photos that we've got in the slideshow, very often in the photos, they'll still have their transport tracks on because for doing propaganda shoots, obviously they moved them on a train and did the shoot and just didn't bother changing the tracks over. Even
in combat, when the various units would have propaganda teams embedded with the units, as even on during the Battle of the Bulge. They had propaganda units with the advancing Nazis, and they would stage. So they'd go through, carry out an activity, and then they would stage certain movements that they would then film by the soldiers would carry out certain movements across roads, obstacles, whatever else, and the propaganda teams would film that. And as people have gone back and looked at those propaganda films now and saying, yeah, these are obviously staged situations because we can see that they're actually going away from where they're actually attacking 5 minutes beforehand. So they're just setting these things up for the propaganda rather than actually capturing live activities. So.
Now, look, propaganda is an ugly word, but it's worth mentioning that certainly every cool photo of the Battle of El Alamein featuring Australians, if you actually dig into the provenance, the photo was shot a few weeks after the battle with people staging. Oh, and this is what I did with my bayonet. So, everyone does this stuff, but it's worth noting when you look at the photos, they're not quite what you think they are.
Well, I think the ones that actually in combat were like the Panther versus Pershing in whichever cathedral that was. I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah.
That was, real things. All right.
Sometimes they're real, often they're not. Partly just the limitations of photography in the 1940s meant that it was a big piece of equipment. It took a long time to take a photo. But, yeah.
All right. Despite weighing 70 tons, the Tiger II is disconcertingly easy to drive. Unlike the American Sherman, it's driven by a hydraulic-assisted steering wheel with double differential.
Sorry, just what's your point there? You're saying the Sherman was hard to drive?
Well, they were saying this one was actually easy to turn. Basically, it had power steering. That's what they're trying to say.
Okay.
All right. Which allowed it to turn 360 degrees more quickly and have two types of radius of curvature. So one small and one large, same as the Tiger I. Its pre-selected gearbox produced by the Maybach with 8 forward and 4 reverse allows the driver to move up and down the gears without clutching. Makes it much easier for the drivers trained in its use. Now, this is an important point. Trained in its use. Yeah. But
on the other hand, most Germans have never driven a car, so when they get shown their tank, it's the first vehicle they've driven. So they just learn that. I mean, gear selectors. British buses used, the red double deckers used gear selectors into I think the 1990s. It's an interesting technology in that you select the gear you want to go to, and then you engage, and then the engine moves over to the next gear.
Yeah. However, with all that said, the final drive weakness and mechanical issues were exacerbated by a lack of experienced crews, and the drivers they were getting were learning to drive on Panzer Is and Twos, being, guess what, 60 tons lighter than what they were doing.
It's a bit like the British training tank drivers on Bren gun carriers, though. Universal carriers. We know the difference. Yep.
Actually. However, with extra training and improved seals and gaskets, the reliability improved on the Tiger IIs, with statistics from 15th of March 1945 showing reliability rates of 59% of the Tiger II, almost equal to the 62% of the Panzer IV and better than the 48% of the Panther that were operational at this period. Now,
that was the thing that surprised me when I came across that. It was like, oh, hang on, the narrative is that these were unreliable, unwieldy machines, but they were actually, in terms of reliability. Now there were teething problems with the first ones introduced, which happens with every tank. But within the first 3 months, it was pretty quick. The timing they
I think this is a bit of lies and damn statistics, because the date they've picked is 15th of March. There probably weren't a whole lot of Tiger IIs still running around at that stage, and the ones that were the ones that had survived everything else by that stage, and so either had a good crew that knew what they were doing, or were obviously had been built better. So that's why they were able to achieve those sort of operational reliability ratings, because they were the top of the heap that actually had survived until the end of the Third Reich.
Sure. Now I just want to address a bit of the chat that's going on in the comments here. Thanks, guys. We appreciate it. There was an issue with the metallurgy, particularly of the turret production, but in fact, all round.
That's the next paragraph.
Yeah, but I just want to talk about the welds, because in particular, the turrets, often they had cracks in the production. Now, before in a non-war period, you just throw those ones out or melt them down and scrap them. But they ended up just having to put welds through the cracks and put them into serviceable tanks. And partly this is, as mentioned, the Germans were running out of critical minerals, and also partly that their factories were constantly being bombed as they were trying to build them. And there were field trials at proving grounds, Western proving grounds like Aberdeen in the US, where they would hit the Tiger II with a big round, and it wouldn't penetrate, but every weld in the tank would go sproing, and there'd be enormous holes, and the thing would just about be falling apart. Anyway, Rob, continue, please.
So even though it had 150 mil sloped armor on the front glasses and 80 mils on the sides, the steel was more brittle than desired due to a lack of elements such as molybdenum, vanadium, etc. At that late stage of the war. And so, yes, it was brittle and would crack and break, and as you say, it would have to be welded over. You could almost afford to build 10 Shermans for the cost of a King Tiger, but by then the Nazis didn't have the crews to drive that many tanks. So that's kind of why you need to go for this.
For the super tank.
For the super tank.
I'd also say that if you can only fuel up one tank, even a gas guzzler, you're better up fueling a good gas guzzler than fueling up 10 Shermans. The Germans could not dream of those amounts of fuel. But, because they shouldn't have started the war in the first place because they were going to lose. But yeah.
But I mean, if they could have gotten the reliability of the Sherman into one of these sort of big super tanks, then that might have been very useful for them.
Yeah, but as we've noted, the reliability numbers on this thing aren't actually that bad.
They're pretty bad. As I was saying, I think my explanation for those is probably more accurate than what the lies the statistics are telling us. All right, and we may think that 492 tanks is not a lot built, but considering the Henschel factory that built the hulls was 95% bombed out by the Allies, it's surprising how many ended up getting built. And having said that, they lost around 600 hulls in 1944 from the bombing. So think of how many more.
600 more Tiger IIs. I mean, they wouldn't have won the war, but they might have held the Soviets back for a bit longer. Yeah.
Well, you think about, I mean, a big limiting factor would have still been the petrol for them. So, all right, they were deployed in heavy tank battalions of 45 Tiger IIs, which is 3 companies of 14. Plus 3 headquarters in the battalion headquarters, and each company with 3 platoons of 4 tanks and 2 tanks in the headquarters. It was quite often for most of the tanks to break down on the way from the railhead to the start of operations. Of the 45 first delivered to the Eastern Front in August of 44, all but 8 broke down before reaching combat 50 kilometres away from the railhead.
Now, I would point out this is in the teething period problem. But,
yes, it is very much a teething period, but they kind of needed to get them going because the Panthers had not done the job by this stage, and so Kursk had been lost and Operation Bagration had started.
Yeah, it does come down to particularly the way the Panthers were rushed into Kursk.
Remember the Panthers were not rushed. Kursk was delayed 4 months so that the Panthers could get there.
Yeah, but they were still put there before the drivers knew what they were doing with them.
And yes, just they roll off the trains and catch on fire just for the hell of it. Variants. Command variants were the only real ones, and they just added more radios and took out some of the ammunition. The 71-ton Jagdtiger tank destroyer was made from the chassis, making the 67-ton Tiger II the heaviest turreted tank, and the Jagdtiger the heaviest armoured fighting vehicle of the war.
And, let's not forget that part of the reason the Germans lost the Battle of the Bulge was because the Jagdtiger tried to go over a bridge and collapsed the bridge, and the whole assault had to stand and stare at the gap.
All right. No armored recovery vehicle variants were made for either the Tiger II, meaning that there was no battlefield recovery. So you either had to hope that you won and your mechanics could come up and repair and refuel your tanks, or you just left them there.
Maybe you could get 3 or 4 Famos, the huge half tracks they had up there. But that's an enormous commitment of a limited resource there.
That's exactly right, and that's not battlefield recovery. That's after the battle recovery.
Sure.
Yeah. So if the 600 to 650 destroyed hulls in the Henschel factory had survived, it's likely other variants would have evolved, as seen by the Grill and the E100 hulls found at Henschel's testing ground at Haustenbeck.
Is E100 the mouse?
No.
No, okay,
no,
sorry.
It's smaller than mouse. It's basically, so in World of Tanks, you go Tiger 1, Tiger 2, E75, E100. So, the mouse is twice as big as the E100, which is twice as big as the E75, which is twice as big as that sort of thing.
It's like A4 paper. Yeah, all right, okay.
There you go. All right. Conflicts. Normandy. July 18th, 1944, the Allies launched Operation Goodwood to defeat the German resistance around Caen. During the offensive, the British and Canadian troops, for the first time, encountered the Tiger II. Excuse me. The 12 active the 12 Tiger IIs active in that sector of the time were part of the 21st Panzer Division, and the unit was positioned unusually close to the front and went into action on the first day of the offensive of Operation Goodwood. The debut of the new tank was not flawless, and several were knocked out on the first day.
I don't think there's ever been a tank that had a flawless debut. Possibly the Sherman at El Alamein, but
Anyway, that's a good thing to. We'll look that up. We'll look that up. Saying, okay. Surprisingly, the new type of tank remained unnoticed. The end of the month passed without 21st Army Group having a clue about the presence of a new German tank on their front. And Winston Churchill told Parliament in August that the enemy had not yet brought any new weapons into the battle, whilst at least 4 Tiger II tanks had already been knocked out in the British sector at that stage.
Which does go to show how tank ID was not well advanced in World War II.
Well, that's where they got the name, the Pan Tiger. So when they knew about Panthers and they saw this tank with a very sloped front, and they said, well...
And there was parts commonality with the Panther. So
it's got a turret like a Tiger, and it's got sloped armour like a Panther, so therefore it's a Pan Tiger. That's all it was, is put the two of them together.
All it was. Yeah. All right, Rob, tell us about the fillet pocket.
Fillets. Filet? Fish fillet? No. Anyway, Operation Cobra saw the US forces break out of Normandy and rush south and then east around the Nazi forces facing the Brits and the Canadians and the Polish forces. As Patton moved north to encircle the Nazis and cut them off, he was ordered to stop, and the Canadians and Polish forces pushed south to close the gap and trap the remaining Nazis in the fillet gap or fillet pocket. However, the Nazis pushed a number of Tiger IIs into the gap to keep it open as the Canadian and Polish forces got separated from the Allies. Oh, John's broken something.
I've broken it. Yeah.
That enabled by forcing open the gap in the Nazis were able to escape another 10 to 20,000 troops through the fillet gap.
It's going to take a while.
Yep, and have them evacuate up to back to Paris, and they across the Seine. Whereas the Allies did manage to trap about 50,000 Nazis in the gap. However, they were hoping to get more than that, and that was the problem, is that a number of them got out. And the Tiger IIs were instrumental in basically forcing through the Canadian and Polish forces that were trying to keep the area closed off to them.
Wow, you did very well doing that with no teleprompter. Yeah. Congratulations, Rob.
So anyway, it was a 10-mile gap, and yes, this is one of, but not the last, or not the first, and not the last instances where Montgomery and Bradley and Patton and Eisenhower all had different ideas about what was going to happen on the Allied front of getting out in basically defeating Germany.
Look, I still maintain Eisenhower was right. Patton's idea of deep thrusts would have led to him being badly cut off when you're fighting Manstein. And everyone who's studied his work, cutting off deep thrusts is just bread and butter to a German general. Patton would have looked very foolish if he'd been allowed to do what he wanted to do. Having said that, Patton had great staff work.
If Patton only took his female vegetarian sensitivity training course. Thanks, Alan. Yeah. Anyway.
Oh, and Jay Bowser's joined us from Chattanooga. So, hello. Yes.
Thank you.
The sexiest tank to ever suck. Well, I'm arguing different, but anyway. Yes. Not only is it sexy. The point I'm trying to make, and we made this with Tiger 1, and it's doubly so of Tiger 2, oddly enough, is that it would have made no sense for the Soviets to build Tiger 2. It would have made no sense for the Americans to build Tiger 2. The British were incapable of building Tiger 2. But for the Germans, with the problem that they faced in 1943, Tiger 2 was it's still not going to solve their problems, but they needed to roll a lot of sixes in wargaming terms. Okay,
let's bring it back to Boys from the Dwarf, and that's when Rimmer says, and that's when I rolled a 5 and a 6.
Yeah, they needed to roll a lot of sixes. And to be fair to the Germans, they're like, well, at the start of the war, we rolled all these sixes. Well, we'll just keep rolling them.
Right. And have we said hello to Raghouse? Raghow?
Not lately, but hello.
And from Melbourne.
Yeah. Welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show. All right, the Eastern Front, Operation Bagration. So
I believe the Russians call it Bagration.
Yeah,
but it's written Bagration to me.
I speak Strine, and I say Bagration. Right. Of the 45 Tiger IIs of the 501st Heavy Panzered Battalion, not led by Darth Vader, delivered to the Eastern Front in August of 44. All but 8 broke down. This is the one I was talking about before reaching combat 50 kilometres away from the railhead. Then on the first day of combat, 3 were ambushed and destroyed by T-34s. This is so remember, T-34s didn't have the 85mm gun by this stage. Oh, actually,
I'd like to know which version this was.
But either way, it was the case that they got shot in the side. So this is when the turret side armour and the turret ammo storage was exposed as a weakness. Efforts were made to overcome this issue by installing the track hangers, and so that tracks could be used as extra armour on the rear sides of the turret, but also directions were given to remove the ammo from the turret storage, reducing the rounds carried in the tank to 68 in the hull and slowing the reloading process.
Yeah, that would have been a very unpopular order.
Oh, it'll stop your tank going up in smoke.
Yeah, but you want rounds to hand, and that's always been a thing for loaders. Yeah.
All right. By 1st of September, just 26 Tiger IIs remained operational to the battalion. Following the losses through August and September, the unit was resupplied with Tiger I's and operated both Tiger I and Tiger II simultaneously. However, disaster followed once more in January 45 during an attack at Lissau. Let's say that way. Conducted without adequate preparation and reconnaissance, the Soviets ambushed and destroyed almost the entire battalion by using IS tanks and concealed anti-tank guns. Nonetheless, the battalion reported destroying a number of enemy tanks during the period of contact. Its last Tiger II was lost on 14th of January when the 12-ton bridge it was crossing collapsed.
Oh, weirdly enough.
70-ton tank, 12-ton bridge. Now, who's going to win?
we have discussed how, if you had a 40-ton tank and a 30-ton bridge, engineers do put some fudge factors in. Yeah. You'd give that a go. But 10-ton bridge... 70-ton tank.
Tasman's correcting me. They were T-34-85s. There you go.
Okay, yeah.
I didn't actually look that up. So sorry.
Anywho, let's
keep going.
Yeah, let's move on. Why not?
All right. The Soviets did manage to capture 2 intact Tiger IIs and return them to Kubinka for study. They actually managed to capture 3, but I think one of them didn't. They might have just blown it up. So they
was certainly one that was good enough to drive itself out to be shot at, but wasn't good enough for mobility trials.
Yeah.
But
and the Soviets complained about the mobility of the tank in and of itself, saying this thing doesn't drive very well. It breaks down all the time. Why are we worried about this thing? But as somebody pointed out, maybe they just didn't have the training for driving that sort of tank. They didn't even need to bash anything in with a hammer.
Yeah.
All right. The Soviets also found that the ISU 122s were effective against the Tiger IIs with their large HE rounds that could knock the tracks off from about 30 if the round landed within 30 feet. So just that size of an explosion could damage the Tiger IIs. Yeah,
I mean, I think it's worth noting that the IS-2 versus Tiger II it was kind of a draw. There were times when the IS-2s definitely had the advantage, and there were times when the Tiger IIs came out on top. So yeah, as is always the way with tank combat. He who sees first and shoots first tends to win most.
Yeah.
But yeah,
ambush is the way to go. Yeah. The 103rd SS Heavy Panzer Battalion claimed approximately 500 kills in the period from January to April 45 on the Eastern Front.
And it's worth noting almost all photos of Tiger IIs in action, for whatever degree they're actually in action. The 103rd is a lot of them. Tends to feature prominently in the photography.
There you go. However, where was I? Oh, for the loss of the 45, the entire battalion of Tiger IIs, most of which were abandoned and destroyed by their own crews after mechanical breakdowns or lack of fuel gain.
Now, just quickly, they had a cute trick that if they had the gun in its recoil position, and then they locked it there and fired it, it disabled the tank. So it was quite a nifty thing they did.
What they would do is, and we'll just go and describe that later, is they take the fluid out of the recoil mechanism. So it was a hydraulic fluid in the recoil mechanism within the tank. They would drain that and then fire the gun. That would then lock it in the recoil position and couldn't be used any further from there. Which is why some of the tanks appear to have much shorter barrels than the fully operational tank, because that's because they've been locked in that position by the retreating by the crews abandoning their tank. All right, the occupation of Hungary on 15th of October, 1944, Tiger IIs of the 503rd Heavy Panzer Battalion were involved in taking the Hungarian capital of Budapest, ensuring they remained with the Axis until the end of the war. The 503rd remained in the Hungarian theatre of operations for 166 days, during which time it accounted for 121 Soviet tanks, 244 anti-tank guns, and artillery pieces, 5 aircraft, and a train.
So it's good to get a train on them.
I was about to say, you want to be able to draw a train on the side of your tank. Do you
get a special stripe for that?
Because
they did barrel stripes. The tanks didn't do little kill stickers, but
this was set against the loss of 25 Tiger IIs, 10 of which were knocked out by Soviet troops and burned out. 2 were sent back to Vienna for a factory overhaul, while the remaining 13 were blown up, disabled by the crews to prevent them from falling into enemy hands.
Operation Market Garden.
Just a quick little snippet here. On 24th September 44, lightly armed British paratroopers defending Arnhem knocked out a Tiger II with 2 rounds from a British Piat anti-tank weapon, and it was also damaged by a 6-pounder anti-tank gun in an otherwise very unequal engagement.
Look, people make fun of the Piat, but as a socking great shaped charge fired by a spigot mortar, not by a spring. It was not a spring. It was a spigot mortar. The spring cocked the mechanism. The Piat was actually a very capable anti-tank weapon that sure only had 100 meters range, but it could be fired from cover. And being able to fire from cover is quite an important thing for operators. Anyway, Piats were pretty cool actually, but
but no, it's well named as the Boys anti-tank rifle.
Yeah, well, projector. What is it? Projector infantry anti-tank, something like that.
Battle of the Bulge, here it is. It's often said that if the Americans won the Battle of the Bulge at Bastogne, the Germans lost it at Le Glaise.
Now, one of the Tiger IIs in the slideshow, for those who are watching the YouTube video, is one of the destroyed Tiger IIs at Le Glaise. So the Belgians have kept it there.
Wasn't the Belgians? Yeah. We'll get on to that.
All
right. So 4 heavy Panzer battalions were committed to the Ardennes offensive with 150 Tiger IIs, more than a third of the total build at that time, which I think was about 417. With only enough fuel for 4 to 6 days, they were planning. This was the plan for the Ardennes offensive, planning on capturing Allied fuel dumps to allow them to continue their advance to Antwerp. Once they got to Antwerp, they were going to watch the US and UK alliance collapse.
Which was a fundamental misunderstanding of the fact it was even an alliance. But, the UK was not calling any shots at this point.
Which would then force them to sue for peace, and then which allowed Hitler to sue for peace with the US and UK forces, and then allowing him to then turn around to defeat the Soviets. This is all the grand plan of the Ardennes offensive of December 44.
It was, let's roll lots of sixes.
And hope they explode.
Yeah.
Exploding sixes, yeah. At least that was the plan, as it worked pretty well in 1940. Remember that. It did work in 1940.
Yeah, all the dice came up sixes in 1940, so let's do it again.
I think the French and the British forces had a couple of minuses to their target numbers for those.
Yeah. And sheer incompetence went a long way, but yeah.
All right, advancing through the Ardennes forest worked in 1940 with the Panzer 1s and 2s weighing under 10 tons. It's much harder with a 69-ton Tiger II that is restricted on what roads and bridges will support it.
I mean, we've seen this today in Ukraine, where the Challenger 2s and the Abrams are just too heavy unless you've got enormous industrial support. But and engineering support.
Yeah. All right. Whilst the weather was terrible from the 16th of December when the offensive started, for the first week, keeping the Allied air support grounded, the Nazis could not meet their timelines, giving the Allies time to remove or destroy their fuel dumps, or just not finding them in the thick forest. There was one fuel dump right at the very leading edge of their offensive. If they had found, they got within about 2 miles of it, around near the Glaze. If they'd found that, they could have kept on going, but they missed it. They missed it. All right. The leading elements of Kampfgruppe Piper made it the furthest, just past the village of the Glaze, where there is a marker on the road showing the furthest, basically how far they got, and saying this is where they stopped.
I mean, there's at least a Tiger II in the town as well. So.
There's a bit beyond that. Anyway, they'd met stiff resistance from US forces at Stumont, where the infantry forces there were using a 90mm anti-aircraft gun to harass the Panthers and Tiger IIs in the village, and basically forcing them to rethink what they were doing.
90mm is a big round for harassment. But,
but again, like the 88s, it's a case of turning it around to point at the ground and say, "Yep, take this, you Nazi Huns." And the advanced forces in Le Glaze were then harassed and disabled by Sherman's firing HE shells. So it's a bit complicated to explain in a podcast without maps and so forth, to show that they'd gotten to various points and then they had advanced elements forward of the main force. And the advanced elements were then encountered by the Shermans coming up, and they managed to take out some of the Shermans, but then further Shermans came up and they couldn't hit them for some reason. So they had these 2 Tiger IIs sitting on top of a hill, firing down at the Shermans, missing them, and the Shermans are firing back with HE shells, which are just knocking bits and pieces off the Tiger IIs and disabling them. And so the crews said, right, we're out of here.
Yeah. To be fair to the crews in that situation, Germany had so few skilled tank crews. They were actually much more valuable than even in this rare tank. The moral of the story is don't get on a 2-front war in Central Europe, or don't be Nazis. That's the real moral of the story.
That is the real moral. Don't be Nazis. All right. So most of the 150 Tiger IIs were lost during the month of the battle, from running out of fuel, being abandoned, breaking down and being abandoned, or being disabled by the enemy action and being abandoned, or just being destroyed by the Allies.
That's a third of all the Tiger IIs ever built.
Yep. And let's face it, they weren't mechanically sound. Were too fuel hungry and too big to recover.
Yeah. That's such a but the Ukrainians are having exactly this problem with particularly with the Challenger 2s, is that nothing they have in their inventory can recover the damn things when they get stuck. It's a big deal. Yeah.
All right. Advance to Berlin. All right. 30th of March, 45, as the 3rd U.S. Armored Division was carrying out an encirclement of 350,000 Nazi troops in the Ruhr pocket, heading towards Paderborn. The leading force was ambushed by 5 King Tigers from the 507 Heavy Panzer Battalion. They destroyed 17 Shermans and 17 half-tracks. Major General Rose, in command of the 3rd U.S. Armored Division, was following up the lead elements of his forces when another group of 9 King Tigers attacked the advancing U.S. tank battalion right behind him of 75 Shermans, trapping General Rose between the 2 ambushing forces. Whilst trying to escape the small division headquarters force, which was 3 armoured scout cars of 15 people, was stopped by the Tiger IIs, and he was shot.
Was he killed?
Yeah.
Right.
No, he was killed. Yeah. The next day,
there weren't that many major generals in World War II who were killed. I mean, it was 4 U.S. lieutenant generals in the whole war. But anyway, okay.
Point being, he was leading from the front, trying to claim the glory of cutting off these 350,000 forces. And
it's always the risk with leading from the front that what happens next?
And having a very small mobile divisional headquarters. The next day, the U.S. forces took Paderborn and closed the Ruhr Gap, trapping the remaining Nazi troops in that area. So basically, cutting them out of the war. At the same time, further south in the city of Cassel, Cassel, however you want to say it.
Cassel, I would say with a K.
Where the Henschel factory was located. The last 8 King Tigers rolled out of the factory and straight into combat, knocking out 9 US tanks advancing on the city.
You'd feel that was unfair, wouldn't you? Intelligence says there's no enemy tanks in the area, and they just crank the factory on. And
They were the last ones off the line.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the same day.
Hmm.
Hang on, I'll just. The battle for Cassel continued over the next few days, with the Nazi infantry and tanks getting separated by US artillery barrages. 7 of the King Tigers withdrew toward Berlin, leaving 1 to cover their withdrawal. It was positioned well and halted the US advance until a local civilian was able to guide US forces around behind it, where tank destroyers were able to knock it out from behind. The 7 withdrawing King Tigers either ran out of fuel or broke down or were disabled by the crews. These were the last large armoured clashes on the Western Front. Unit history has a Super Pershing destroying a King Tiger at Dessau in Germany on 21st of April. However, there were no units within target 2s within 100 kilometres, and so it's believed that the destroyed tank was a Panther. But look, maybe. We don't know.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't there. And then as the Red Army advanced to the centre of Berlin, a pair of Tiger 2s continued their defence of the Nazi headquarters.
Shall we talk about Wagner's Gotterdamerung now? That seems like the moment for it.
Look, I think it's a very lovely time, and we can. I've got a few more points of that later on. But
we want to talk about Tiger 2, but when we did the trailer for this episode, because we do little trailers on mostly on YouTube and on Facebook, I used Wagner's Gotterdamerung, which is the Twilight of the Gods, and intriguingly, the saying when the fat lady sings. Apparently, Berlin radio played Wagner's Gotterdamerung, the Twilight of the Gods, the last night before Berlin fell. Mm. And according to the legend of Hitler's bunker, the high command all gathered around the radio to listen to the 3 hours of Wagner, and then retired to their offices with a Luger in hand or a cyanide pill. And so, literally, the last moment before the death of Nazi Germany, and Prussia doesn't exist anymore either, and that was quite a significant kingdom as well. They were listening to this piece of music, the Twilight of the Gods, and at the end of it, Brunhilde, the Fat Valkyrie, sings. So the fat lady sang literally for the end of the Third Reich, which is kind of ironic and kind of cool in my view. Well, cool might be the wrong word. I was thinking, if Australia was falling to an enemy assault, the closest thing we've got is, am I ever going to see your face again by the Angels? We've got some time. We need to build some more culture. All right, moving on. Rob, tell us more.
All right. Okay, so Tiger 2s often broke down or just ran out of fuel. Nazi troops would drain, as I said before, drain the fluid from the recoil mechanism and then fire the gun locking in the recoil position so it could not be fired anymore when abandoning the tank, which was why some looked to have shorter barrels. US troops would remove the muzzle brake from disabled Tiger 2s and sometimes open the engine covers to indicate the tank was no longer a threat, allowing following troops to move past without trying to engage it. Supposedly, it was never penetrated from the front. But I did see a photo of a knocked out Tiger 2 from the Battle of the Bulge showing a shot hole in the front. It may not have gone through, which was implied to be from a Firefly, which the 17 pounder of a Firefly was one of the weapons that was tested later after the war to show that it could go through if it had the had the
tungsten cord round.
Tungsten cord round, that's what I'm thinking of.
But it would probably break all the welds in the Tiger 2 anyway, so...
Anyway, so front armour, yes, good. Worked well. Operators, Nazis, lots given to the Waffen SS Panzer battalions.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. After the war and remaining tanks. All right, and this is where we will get to the Swedish tank that somebody was asking about before. I can't see it in the comments now, but yes, somebody was asking about the Swedish tank. We'll get to that. Target practice. Henschel's proving ground at Harstenbeck fell into the British zone at the end of the war, allowing them to gather a number of various types of tanks and prototypes and take them back to England. Whilst Panthers were used for testing how the armour held up against 17 and 20-pounder guns, a Tiger 2 was used to test the 6.5 centimetre Hesh rounds, which was found it blew large scabs off from the inside of the tank until eventually the engine caught fire and the vehicle was rendered useless for any further tests.
Look, Hesh to a point, is an amazing round. So it's high explosive squashed head. So it hits the outside and it doesn't penetrate, but it forces the inside of the armor to spray all around the interior of the tank.
And it was quite alarming for them when they were firing it from about 50 meters away, and at one stage some sort of ricochet or scab came off the tank that went about 100 meters away. So they were going, oh, maybe we shouldn't do this anymore. But they kept on going, and they shot it from various different angles, from various different sides of the tank to see what it would do. And as I said, eventually they set the engine on fire, and it became slag. All right. On the 29th of August, 44, Tiger number 104 engaged a group of M4 Shermans of the British 23rd Hussars and was repeatedly hit in the tracks. In an effort to manoeuvre, the Tiger II conducted a sharp turn and the final drive failed, incapacitating the tank. The crew then abandoned the tank. This vehicle was later recovered and is now on display at the Tank Museum, Bovington. And sorry, one of the other prototype tanks is the other Bovington tank. That's
which has good photos. So
yes, that does have good photos. King Tiger 213 at La Glaise was bought by the local publican for the village at the price of a bottle of cognac in the summer of 45. When it was the last of 16 King Tigers being removed from the area by US troops. It was of the furthest Nazi advance during the Battle of the Bulge. It was refurbished in the 1970s and still sits in the street in front of the December 44 museum in La Glaise, Belgium.
It is in Belgium?
Yeah.
You said it wasn't in Belgium. Anyway, that's fine.
I didn't say
anyway, my bigger point is that it is in the slideshow for those who are watching the video feed, and we'll chuck the slideshow on Facebook and YouTube as well.
It looks bloody awesome.
I mean,
she's got a great big Tiger too.
There it is. There it is right now. There it is. That's the Glaze Tiger too.
Or for a bottle of cognac. By the local publican.
Which is a really, you can imagine the Americans was like, we got a bottle of, we couldn't move this thing anyway.
Well, they'd already taken out 15 Tiger 2s from the area. So this is the last one. It's probably saying, I just want to go home by this stage. It's probably getting tiring. It's like, no, of course you can have it.
Yeah.
What are we going to do with it?
Hand me that bottle. Yeah.
Right. In the city of, here we go, Fontenay-Saint-Pierre, France, in France, under road D913, there lies parts of a Tiger 2. It was blown up by a scrap metal dealer to clear the way for the road being built. On 26th of August 44, the tank was on its way to the Filet Pocket when it was attacked by P-47 fighter bombers. The
Jabos.
The tank then either drives into a bomb crater and is abandoned, or is abandoned and then shunted into the bomb crater to clear the road.
Which is a very rare case of fighter bombers actually destroying a tank versus claiming destroying a tank. But
the threat of them was very high.
Yeah.
So
if I was driving a tank, I'd be terrified of the things.
But the main thing is the threat. Having the threat of them was may have been more important than having them actually do what they were doing. So and. All right, the turret has since been recovered and efforts are being made to excavate what is left of the hull.
Because it's worth probably, $1 million at least.
Yep. But there still may be live rounds inside the hull, so best to be careful about that. All right, the Musée de Blindés Semois.
Or
Samour.
Yeah.
France has the only running Tiger II at the moment, with the Swiss Thun Tank Museum working on restoring their Tiger II to working order. The Tiger II was one of the few captured tanks that the French army did not operate after the war.
Because there weren't enough of them, but yeah.
Well, there's plenty lying around.
Just remember, why did the French Foreign Legion operate so many German tanks after the war? Because the French Foreign Legion was made up of Nazis.
You need somebody to fight a war. Here's a bunch of guys who have a lot of experience. Anyway.
Need something to do.
After the war, Sweden asked for various German tanks to test and to see what they liked. They eventually, in 1947, found a burned-out Tiger II south of Paris that the French let them have. In Sweden, they repaired it to running order and put it through various tests, but eventually, and with great difficulty due to its size and weight, moved it to a range and used it for target and bombing practice. Various parts were kept, the engine and the gearbox, and even the gun, until it was scrapped in the 1980s, 2 weeks before a historian from the Arnselen Museum turned up to say, have you guys got anything we could put in the museum? But unfortunately, it was gone. But even the gearbox and engine have a bit of a story of controversy of being lent out to a British collector and promises to return it and so forth. And people going to jail and fraud and all sorts of other stuff. So, yeah. And look, there's a lot written about Tiger 2s that we didn't get into, that other people with more time and effort would discuss. So please feel free to go out there and listen to that, and we're just bringing out, highlighting various bits and pieces that interested us. Yeah. All right, legacy. Yes, the Tiger 2 does appear in Girls on Panzer. The Kuro Marini Girls Academy operated Tiger 2s, shown as produced from June to September 1944, as recognised by the 9 sprocket teeth and the carjack at the rear of the tank, showing that Girls on Panzer can count rivets with the best of them.
I think Girls on Panzer counts rivets better than most. But
Right.
yeah. So tell us, Rob, what's it like in World of Tanks?
Yes, it is fun to drive in World of Tanks, or it was when grinding the Tiger 1, Tiger 2, E75 line some years ago. Nowadays, I don't seem to do as well in World of Tanks these days.
Sorry.
Yep.
Siri had some thoughts. Yep.
Yeah, saying how bad I am at World of Tanks these days. Now, now the title of the episode, putting the Gott in Gotterdamerung, or putting the gods in the Twilight of the Gods, as part of the Wagner's Ring Cycle, which got me to thinking: are there any songs about the King Tiger? There is a song called King Tiger by Panzerchrist, a Danish blackened death metal band. I don't know what subgenre is blackened death metal, but anyway, that was pretty hard. Then there's I've Got a Tiger in My Tank by the Jalopy 5, a gas company ad jingle from the 50s. But my favourite was a band named Galactic Kraken, with the album named Starship Velociraptor, with a song called Army of Tigers by Jonathan Young. Where
Jonathan Young is super cool, by the way. I actually listen to a lot of his stuff. Mostly he does covers of better known songs, but in extreme heavy metal style. He's good. He's fun.
Right.
Yeah.
Where an animation showing a Gandalf-like wizard catapulting an army of tigers at the sun to defeat the day.
The days had it coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The first effort didn't go so well, so he then stacks all the tigers together to form a colossal galactic kaiju tiger, which then goes on to defeat the sun tonight. So that was a pretty cool song and animation. So anyway. So I feel it was the Twilight of the Gods in that it was a god of the battlefield. It was protected, so well protected, a flawed god, but it did signal the end of the Nazis, and that's all they could do.
And they needed to go.
They needed, oh God, yes, they needed to go.
So, yeah.
All righty.
That was good. Now the poll is locked at 14 votes, 50-50. Tiger 2, a waste of resources versus a good idea for a bad situation.
For the 16 people who've gone online, now's your chance to make a difference. Who do we want?
Yeah.
We're not getting into that right now.
Yeah, come on, people.
Vote. We go.
Cast your vote in the poll.
There we go. Waste of resources. Yeah. All right.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, someone's added one more vote. Excellent. Alan's asking, what World of Tanks and War Thunder are computer games at home or arcade? There are no more arcades, Alan. Everyone's playing on their phones.
Or
computers or PlayStations.
And Steam Decks are finally coming to Australia.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you'll be able to do it handheld.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. Anyway, moving on. We now are bringing you our interview with Mother of Tanks, which is pretty cool. And we thank Sasha enormously for giving us half an hour of her time. And after that, we're going to talk about a lot has happened in the world of war in general and tanks in particular in the last month.
And I have a new design of tank to show you all.
Okay. All right. So there's
that to look forward to.
There's a lot happening in the second half, but for now, please enjoy us talking to the Mother of Tanks herself, and we will be back in about 20 minutes to talk more about quite a lot of things that have been happening. So we are joined right now by Sasha Maggio, the Mother of Tanks and the host of the Why We Fight podcast. Sasha, welcome to the show. Hope you enjoy it.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, and tell us about why we fight. I gather you think it's the world's largest something?
I'm pretty sure that it is the largest ever combined joint multinational military history effort. It started out with, it started out during, I started planning it during the pandemic. So I had just changed jobs and moved, and we had to work from home for most of the time. And to fill that time, I started, you know, chipping away at that hippie red pile, right? Because we've all got one. And I started doing research on the 1941 GHQ maneuvers, which are still the largest exercise that the U.S. Army has ever conducted. It was, I think, about 500,000 men participating, and
Sorry, is that what's widely known as the Louisiana maneuvers?
so the Louisiana maneuvers were part of it.
Right.
But so it's like Louisiana maneuvers are part of the 1941 GHQ maneuvers, but not the entire thing. There were also the Carolina maneuvers. At some point before that, there were Tennessee maneuvers, which I think there's only one book on, and then there were other maneuvers in other parts of the states. But the Louisiana maneuvers and the Carolina maneuvers in the fall are what we consider the 1941 GHQ maneuvers, which are the largest ever. And because I was working at Fort Leavenworth at the Mission Command Training Program, I thought, I could do this as like a Twitter series and just spend 3 weeks talking about these maneuvers and how they kind of are similar to what we do today. And when I pitched that to the commanding general at the time, it was General Rainey. He said he loved the idea. He put me in touch with his public affairs team, but they could only support 2 days a week. And so I spread it out throughout the year in 2021. And I talked about the changes to the U.S. Army in 1939 to 41, which were there was massive mobilization, modernization, mechanization that had been kind of building throughout the 30s anyway. And then I plan to culminate that series with the talk about the maneuvers and then end it with the like the findings, the results. But a couple of months, not even a couple of weeks into that, General Rainey wanted me to keep going after the maneuvers. He's like, keep going as long as you want, we'll support it. And so I took it to December of 41, talked about the attack on Pearl Harbor and the official declarations that brought the US into the war. And then in January, I planned to pick it up in 1942 and just take it 1 year at a time. And that's when I changed it from Building an American Army to Why We Fight. In January, I also picked up the Marine Corps Museum, or the National Museum of the United States Marine Corps, which is their official title. And they were doing threads on the Pacific, on the Marines in the Pacific. And when I say threads, I mean on Twitter, just a series of tweets that talk about the history. And then for a while, the Land Warfare Center in the UK was also doing a part of the series as well. And then and so it's all written content at this point, though. And when I started the series in 21, I thought that it would be nice to have a podcast, but I didn't have enough attention at the time to kind of like draw in quality guests. I didn't know who I could ask. My network of historians wasn't as big as it could be, and so at this point it was still just written content for those first 2 years. And in January of 2023, I decided I was going to add a podcast.
If I can interrupt for a second, I would say that, sorry, I'd just say one of the defining characteristics of your series is the quality of the guests. I just look on with incredible envy at the people you've managed to get in to talk to you. So, obviously you timed it right, but you really do get some quite sensational people on.
Thank you. I feel like um, I feel like by adding the podcast, I was able to make the series closer to what I envisioned it would be. I knew that there was room to expand it. When I started doing when I brought in the Marine Corps Museum and the Land Warfare Center in 2022, I knew, okay, so we've got, some Brits in there, we've got some Marine Corps in the Pacific in there, and I'm still covering, what we're doing throughout 1942 as far as the Army and the Air Force were concerned. But then by adding the podcast, I knew we could expand it. But when I started, I had planned for 24 episodes. I thought two a month. I'll still be doing 2 threads per week on Twitter. And then, and I just picked 24 topics from my list from my plan for the year. And I reached out to some friends and I was like, let's see who we can find to do these topics. But the enthusiasm that I got was more than I expected. And so I had people coming to me going, well, what about these people? They could talk about this. And what about this person? They could talk about this and this. And I was like, all right, forget my plan. What do you want to talk about? What do you know? What can you add to this? My only stipulation was that it has to be anchored somewhere in 1943 because it was, that was where I was in the series. And it's my dog Pixel.
That's all right.
he just hopped up and he was like, let me participate. Yeah, so that was
we've
my
had
only
cats and dogs and yeah.
We're all for
Go
it.
on.
Yeah, so I said back history, future implications. I'm fine with it. Just it's got to be anchored somewhere at 43, and I ended up with 108 episodes. So yeah, planned for 24. I ended up with 108. I still had 7 that didn't make it. I had to move them to what I call bonus content. And so at the end of the 43 series, I added a Patreon page. I added the Patreon page. It's got one full episode. It's got one bonus episode, and it's got a lot of outtakes from because I was editing so much and just tossing it. But there's a lot of parts in there that are funny or interesting that just didn't add to the topic of the episode that I was editing. And I was just throwing it away. And so I decided I'll just make those outtakes and bonus episodes. I still have seven or 8 episodes that I need to edit that go on the Patreon page because they're just not, I can't fit them into the regular series. But this year it's been all 44. And because of my because of the challenges I'm facing with my regular job, being very busy this summer, I'm behind in editing. So I still have, like, at this point that we're recording, I still have 7 or 8 episodes that I wanted to get out in June, and we're in October. So, and then I've got probably 35 episodes that have been recorded that I need to edit, counting those. And I'm hoping to get most of them done by the middle of December so that I can at least start the Battle of the Bulge part of the series on time.
It seems like when you're looking at it as a finite war and you're saying, well, I've only got from 43 to 45 to go, but the way you're going with the episodes, that might still take a number of years for you. So I think you've got plenty of work to do there, and we really appreciate that you're putting the effort in and getting all these people together and to talk about it. So when do you think you actually get to 44?
44.
Oh, sorry.
35.
Yeah.
I'm hoping to start 45 on time. So the episodes that I'm recording now are all 44 episodes. I hit a snag where, and this is my perpetual problem, right? I planned for 5 or 6 episodes for Normandy because I didn't feel like it was necessary for me to cover it in depth because so many others like Paul Woodage with World War II TV and other platforms cover Normandy in depth. They cover D-Day and they cover Normandy, and maybe they even cover the breakout. But I didn't feel like it was necessary for me to do that, and I ended up with 20 episodes for Normandy, and that's so this is my problem. I don't say, as long as it's relevant. People pitch me really good ideas, and I'm not gonna say no if I feel like it adds to the story. And that's another part of what I was doing is that when we, especially Americans, we only learn like the highlights, right? That we learn about Pearl Harbor, we learn about D-Day, we learn about the Battle of the Bulge in school. We learn about the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but we don't really learn about how the war actually progressed, and we don't learn it in depth unless we learn it very deliberately. And I felt like we needed something like this. We needed to see that it's not an American story. It's a global story. It is not, you can't tell the American part of it, not understand what the Brits and the Australians and the New Zealanders and the Indians and the Canadians and everybody else were doing. And so I have been trying, and I mean I am a one man show, right? But I've been trying to include as much of this as possible. And I like to tell people that we made this history together. We should be telling it together. So.
Yeah, I would say with, just because someone else has done a subject doesn't mean your audience doesn't want to hear you do that subject. So certainly sounds like, having turned D-Day into 20 episodes, you've just led into that. But just a quick question: where does the name Mother of Tanks come from?
Sure. I think it was 2018, 19, and a U.S. Army Public Affairs officer jokingly called me that in a reply to something on Twitter. And I had been on Twitter for a long time, over a decade at that point. I had worked in content and marketing, content development, marketing and content development for over a decade. And when you do that, you have to be on every platform so that you can share your work. And I was like, I wonder if there's a Mother Tanks account already, and there wasn't. And so I made one, and I just kept it private for a while, and I just let my friends know that I had done that. And then I reached a point where I was like, I'm just going to change to this account, and I deleted my old one. And so that's my only Twitter account now. But I after creating this series, I started to branch the Mother of Tanks brand out to the other platforms. So I'm with that name. I'm also on Instagram. I'm on Threads. I'm on Facebook, and yeah. So people can find me everywhere.
Nice one. Now, before we let you go, we do need to ask our obligatory guest question of, what is your favorite tank?
I know time I say this, somebody goes, really? No. I like the Pershing, the M26 Pershing.
Ooh.
So
The
I
medium
know
that was a heavy, that was a tank destroyer, that was a heavy again, whichever way we went. At least it made it to the front lines.
it did, only at the end of the war, and I understand that we didn't really think we needed it. There was a lot of bickering in the War Department at the time over whether or not we needed it. Why are we wasting resources on this? And it only saw a little bit of action in 1945. It came in just at the end of the war, really, just the last few months. And but I feel like it had potential, and I'm one of those. I'm a little idealistic, it's like I absolutely love the Army, right? I love the Army, but I love the Army for everything that it could be, and I love this tank for everything that it could have done. But I mean, it was helpful in Korea. It absolutely crushed some of the T-34-85s. It Did I get that right? Yeah, T-34-85s. And I just know that when we started that war in 1950, well, we didn't start it. When that war began and we were in it, the just trying to using the little chaffies and just getting kind of annihilated by the North Koreans and in these Soviet tanks, that getting the Pershing there with the 90 millimeter gun and being able to crush them, that's to me, that's like I don't know how to word it. I'm all for like, saving the little guy. I'm that's how I am. It's probably my innate American, idealism. But yeah, I like the Pershing for that reason because I saw it as something that came in and tried to save the little guy.
Fair enough. And so you're in 1944 now with your series, which from an American point of view was probably the best year of the war. And you've got 45 coming up. Are you going to keep rolling into later conflicts, get into Korea, maybe into Vietnam at some point?
Yeah, I actually think that really important that we do a post World War II series. I think that we need to understand what happens when we actually fight a war like of this scale to completion and victory. I There's a lot of responsibility that comes with winning, and I think that we don't we don't have a real appreciation for what that actually entails, because this type of war is so different to what our people have been accustomed to for the last 20 or 30 years. And I want to talk about the occupation, and I want to talk about rebuilding and the Marshall Plan, and the shifting geopolitics and how we go from having the Soviet Union be part of the Allies to starting the Cold War. And then we can go into a Cold War series, and then there's room for things like Korea and Vietnam, and later. I feel like it would make sense to shift from this World War II focus to a NATO focus. But I also feel like that if I had just done with NATO focus, it wouldn't have had the same appeal if we don't have the back history going into it, because we need to understand why these things are important. A lot of Americans don't. We don't learn this history very well, like I said, unless we learn it very deliberately.
Yeah, I don't think America's alone in that. Certainly,
Well,
the historic.
I wasn't gonna say anything, but
Yeah, and even I mean the British focus on their history more, but even then it's a very narrow Britain hurrah version of history,
yeah,
and they gloss over quite important stuff that didn't go their way. Yeah,
that's what I mean is that we focus we tell the Americans tell the American story, right? The Brits tell the British story. The Canadians tell the Canadian story. The Americans aren't telling the Canadian story, but the Canadians were right there with us the entire time. Longer, actually. And it's like if
I
we
didn't want to
don't,
say that, but yeah.
yeah, longer, actually. It's like there are some people that don't understand that, World War II didn't start on 7 December 1941. It started years before that. And technically, if you count the Pacific, it started years and years before that. And this is like
Mm.
this lack of understanding and the inability to appreciate the connection between these events and how long the timeline was and how everything is um, interwoven and interconnected and impacting the resources we were sending to the Pacific. That was stuff that wasn't going to North Africa or to Europe or to the home front. The resources that we were providing through things like Lend Lease to keep the Allies in the war until up until we get there, and then even then after that, um, it's like we need a better appreciation for this, and because we don't learn this history very well, it's really hard. And we've all got these knowledge gaps. Even I mean, there are things that I'm learning as I do this series in depth for the first time, and I just I wanted to create a way of sharing the history that wasn't overly serious or overly complex to the point that it put off people that don't normally like history content. And that's my favorite compliment is people that tell me they don't normally enjoy history at all. They didn't like it in school. They don't seek out documentaries. They never turn on the History Channel. They don't like that stuff, but they like what I'm doing. And so it's I feel like that's a decent compliment, and I think that that's probably why I've attracted the guests that I get. So hopefully that
Nice
continues.
one. Rob, you got any more questions?
No, thank you very much, Sasha. That's been really useful, and I really appreciate your talking to us today. Now, what besides Mother of Tanks, do we look for you on any other under any other names, or Why We Fight, or what? How would you like to plug your sites and podcasts?
So I am on just about every platform. You can find me at either Mother of Tanks or under Sacha Maggio or S Maggio. I do have a website, motheroftanks.com, and there are links there to all of my social media. But yeah, I mean, I'm not hiding. So I do post the podcast. I do post the podcast episodes on every platform. Mostly, I do on LinkedIn under my own name, on Facebook under my Mother of Tanks page, Instagram under Mother of Tanks. But I also have a Sash Maggio one on Instagram, and then on Threads, which is like the Instagram answer to Twitter, and on Twitter. So.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we wish you all the best with your project.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Sasha.
I really enjoyed this.
Lovely. Thank you.
So huge thank you for Sasha for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. You know, if you want some serious deep dive histories with an enormous number of current specialists in warfare, because she has so many generals in her show, yeah, recommend it. Go for it. That's where you want to give a go. Okay, Rob, you've got something you want to do.
Now, for Brandon Make Stuff, you asked him a question about how Australians pronounce na. It's yeah, and Australia is spelled with a Y, so Straya, Australia. And the proper way of saying no is yeah, nah, and it's spelled that way as well.
All right.
I just want to clear that up because some people don't
work.
speak Australian, and they need to know. Now, the other thing I want to do is share with folks my lovely daughter's. She had an item to build in class, which was she made Betsy, old Betsy here, with the BET-C. It was a water tank, and she wanted me to show it in
a water tank.
Yes, it's a water tank.
Okay.
And she really liked the idea that the first tanks ever built were disguised as water tanks
for water.
Tanks for water, and so that was the inspiration for her building this in her class. And it floats in the water, and it has a little robot that goes inside of it that powers it along. And the spider here is the captain nowadays, and there is a Lego person trapped inside who's the victim. So but she wanted me to show this because we do a tank podcast. And she said, Daddy, you need to put my old Betsy in the tank podcast. So that's where we're at, boys and girls. No firearm, no turret, no weapons, but it fits the description of a water tank. So it's a disguise all there. Anyway, I just heard
now.
Share that.
Quickly, the poll is currently just one vote ahead for the Tiger 2 being a good idea for a bad situation. And now we come to possibly the most important part of the show. There it goes. We have to thank the patrons, Rob.
How lovely, lovely patrons.
These people give us money. It's incredible. I'd still thank you guys. We don't know why, but you do it, and we appreciate it. So at our top level of the artificers, we have Brian Jenkins, Chris Pezet, Cornelius Weber, Ian McGuinness, Jonathan Markle, Johnny Oot, and Maxi Mixed, and Pear. And then down in the apprentice tier, we have Anton Gorbanov, Carter Heller, Christoph Keller, David Mulvaney, Elliot Spicer, Floaty Burb, Guy Hook, Hans Wang, Henry Hemerd, Jay Beckman Strauss, Jamie Stokes, Jimmy Fenian, Late Apex, Russell Phillips, Scotch 12, Steve Matthews, Tony L, and Vikram Murthy. And I do like the number of previous guests of the show who are patrons. We really, it's not a condition, guys, but we do appreciate it.
Love your work.
Okay, now we're not ready to do beer review yet, are we, Rob?
Because
No. Okay.
this is the interim beer. This is not, even though this is a German beer, it's not. This is the interim beer.
All right, we will move on to the topics for the second half of the show. So first up, and importantly, Ozarmer Fest 2025 next year. The tickets aren't on sale yet, we don't think, but it's going to be the last weekend in
August.
Yep. And we are going to be there. And if any,
all being well, we will be there. We are planning, making definite plans.
Yeah.
If the world happens, then we may not, but we are definitely making plans to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to happen. That's going to happen, John.
Yep. Kerbal Coe's joined us from sunny California. So,
hey, welcome.
Hello. Yes. Anyway, getting back to Ozarmer Fest, it's in Cairns, Australia. It's in one of the best tank museums in the world. They certainly are up there, and I lack the capacity to grade. I mean, Bovington is obviously enormous. Samoa's got some great stuff. Patriot Park in Moscow, they've got some things no one else has got. The Ottawa Tank Museum is amazing, and of course you've got the American armor collection. But Cairns as a private collection is astonishing.
And for running tanks, I mean, yes, not everything is from the 1940s, but as in all the bits and pieces in gubbins inside the tank is from then. But they have got all this stuff up to running situation, and it's great to look at and run around it because they let you jump inside of it and go around the track and say, "I've been in a Panzer IV, haven't you, John?"
Yeah, I have been in a Panzer IV. And it's a cranky ride, I'll tell you. But you want to do that for yourself. So this is our point. Is that next August, the end of August 2025, we will be there in Cairns. If any of our listeners want to join us there, we have promised that anyone wearing a Totally Tank t-shirt, we will buy them one beer. It's not an unlimited fund, but there's definitely a beer in it for you. And we will be organising evening visits to breweries of Cairns, and Cairns has a surprising number of breweries. Come along.
Cairns is a lovely place. If you want to go see crocodiles, rainforests,
Great Barrier Reef,
trip out to the reef, all those fun things. Yeah. But crocodiles are pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Don't go swimming in the ocean, though, boys and girls. It's Australia.
So, but the point is, come. We will organise events outside of the Armour Fest, and the Armour Fest itself is great. And it's going to be good.
Great job.
Yeah. So. That's that out of the way. We're not ready for the review beer yet. So
and yes, we'll have a beer. Who's that, Brett? Yes.
Okay, so Australian Slingers. Now, this is entirely the it's Electro-Optical Systems EOS, which it's about 10 kilometres from where we're recording. This is their headquarters.
Fishwick, aren't they? Yeah.
Fishwick and Queanbeyan.
Yeah. Okay. So.
But
that away.
Particularly in Queanbeyan, when you drive past their factory, they have turrets on their roof that will track your car, and it's quite unnerving.
I've got to say, I don't make the cross-border trips all that often, so I have not noticed it. But I will look for it next time.
I've had a bunch of people I know work for them over the years, and working for a weapons company is tough, but that's not the fault of the company. But anyway, they have produced a anti-drone system with a tracking radar. Importantly, the 30mm proximity fused fragmentation rounds, so they don't need to hit the drone; they just need to get in the vicinity of it, because that's what the Gepard offers, and this is why we were keen on that as an anti-drone solution at the start of the Ukraine war. So that's they've produced this thing that can fit in the bed of a utility vehicle, or what the
pickup truck,
the Americans would call a pickup truck, or it can fit on the turret of a tank. But it's got its own radar, it's got its own optical tracking. I think it's got an infrared mode as well. So it does multi-mode, and it's the sort of thing that it surprised me it's taken this long into the Ukraine war for someone to develop, because it seemed like the obvious approach to the problem. But as long as it was only Ukrainians dying, the priority track was low, I guess.
I mean, it's got a radar that allows them to track things down to the size of a drone. Is the big thing is whereas most radars are designed.
Air defense radars are designed for planes at 15-meter wingspans.
And missiles and rockets and everything else. It's a case of this is down to 30-centimeter drones rather than even a 5-meter rocket would what you'd probably be looking at for air defense radars of various sorts. So this goes right down to that size, be able to track them, detect them, track them, and then lay on a 30mm cannon and blow them out of the sky.
It does have a not only.
I hope you're not flying a kite around that stage.
Yeah, well, it'll get shredded. It also, I think, from what I read, has a secondary machine gun mounted as well, aside from the frag.
It's got a Mag 58 as well.
Yeah.
So,
but the point is, it's small, it's relatively cheap, and they're on their way to Ukraine to see if they work. So,
along with the other one, the Corvo cardboard drone. So this is also another Canberra. Are they part of EOS?
No, I don't believe Corvo are part. I don't think they're local to us. But anyway, so they designed these drones.
We spoke about them last year, but they basically that was when they were sending them over for surveillance work. But now they've been adapted to carry explosive and act as a range extenders for other. So they've got a 75-kilometer range. These they're flat pack drones made from cardboard and rubber bands. So lovely innovation. And
well, all you need is a stiff surface, and if you follow the people like RC Test Flight and Project Air on YouTube, they're not making weapons; they're just making little planes out of folded cardboard, but the weapons potential is always there.
So it can't carry as much explosive as a lot of other drones. But it can carry. They have adapted them to carry some. But the other thing they can do is they can act as a range extender for drones that can carry explosives. And so while they've got a 75-kilometer range, they can then provide a signal booster to other drones that are carrying explosives that are going out to that range, going out further than that. So it was an interesting discussion to my mind to say, well, what's Australia doing to provide these things? And are they just providing cardboard drones or are they providing weapon systems? Because I think there's a little bit more legislation around providing weapon systems to overseas nations versus cardboard drones. And so I'm surprised that it's not been more scrutiny on what's going on there, because a lot of these things are a bit more controlled in Australia as to who can do what for handing stuff around. Now, John's finished his.
All right, so the review beer is a Jever or Java, crisp bitterness, hoppy flavour, dry finish. What actually is it though, Rob?
It says imported premium beer from Germany.
It says for Canada.
Well, no, that's making sure that they meet the requirements for Canadian label.
Okay, 175 years. Is it a lager? Is that what we're getting into here, though?
It says
brewed in accordance with the German purity law.
Imported premium beer from Germany. It says it right on the label.
Oh yeah, brewed and canned in Germany. Okay, yep, okay.
And ignore the parts that's saying about.
Rob, there's been so many horrible mistakes in our beer journey with you that you understand my
ignore the part that says in
reservations.
USA imported by Raven Import Company, Brooklyn, New York, because no, it wasn't brewed there.
Okay.
That's who imports it into.
It just
America.
says imported premium beer. Now I'm holding this up to the microphone. Oh, that's a good sound. Yeah.
Yeah. It's got a lighthouse on it.
Mm-hmm.
With which I'm assuming is either an Arc de Triomphe in the background or a toilet. And yeah, man.
All right.
It is a.
Now we're going to need to a couple more things before we tell you what it tastes like. So you have to taste it. So Rob, we've discovered what the Ukrainian victory plan is.
You say that.
It was hilarious because it started getting reported in the media that there was a Ukrainian victory plan. I was like, that's very interesting.
Yes.
What is it?
Pray tell, what is this victory plan?
Victory plan. And then it turned out that, Zelensky was meant to be presenting it to Biden at a conference in Europe, but then Biden couldn't go because of the hurricanes, which are entirely caused by climate change, by the way.
Not Jewish space lasers or government-controlled weather machines, because only Cobra Commander has the weather control machines.
Yeah.
And we all know he's a... actually, what would he be? He's a communist because the US was fighting him in the 80s, so he must be a communist.
He's a bad guy.
Yeah, he's a bad guy.
Bad guys.
Yeah.
Yes, anyway. So the point that is larger is Ukraine has a victory plan, and when we found out what was in the victory plan, it is essentially US invasion of Russia. World War III is the Ukrainian victory plan.
Well, that is a simple victory plan. I mean, it's going to work. It's going to work.
Well, would it? I'm not entirely sure that the US could actually win that war because they lost in Afghanistan and Iraq was a bit of a draw.
They'd win the war. It's a question of not whether or not Vlad would pull the plug on the nukes. Is the only thing.
Yeah.
They definitely win the war though.
It'd have to be a short war with very limited objectives,
but that's what Hitler wanted with the target.
Yeah, everyone wants a short war. You don't get one.
You don't want to go into a mobile war. You want to have a. You were saying don't let the Allies, once they land in the Normandy, do not let them get into a mobile war. We have to grind them down. But yeah. Victory comes that way.
Anyway, as a plan goes, I mean it's what we already knew. Ukraine needs proper Western assistance. That doesn't mean 12 Challenger 2s and 30 M1s. It means 1,000 M1s. It means proper numbers to sustain forces and actually do things. And it's ammunition, which we don't even know if the West can produce the ammunition in the numbers needed.
They can. It's just nobody's willing to pay for it at the moment.
The SM-3 missile production is 12 a year, and they've blown hundreds of them fighting the Houthis.
Anything can be... the whole point of capitalism is that any of these things can be built if somebody's willing to pay for them. But if nobody's willing to pay for them, they don't get built.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of capitalism. Yeah. Whereas a direct economy, whereby Putin can say, I need more of such and such, S-300 buddy anti-aircraft missiles, then he gets them or 155 rounds for his artillery. He gets them.
Now, just quickly noting, with all seriousness, that Hezbollah is a listed terrorist organisation in Australia. The Israelis, as part of what is the growing conflict involving quite a lot of tanks in Lebanon, killed the leader of Hezbollah, Nasrallah, in the last month. Their stated reason for it was that he would not concede the genocide in Gaza as part of any peace negotiations with Israel. So he refused to rat out the Gazans, and they murdered him for it.
Yeah.
And that for me, I mean, if I could go to my grave with that on my headstone as my achievement, that I can't imagine a greater credit.
Not selling out
the most vulnerable people on Earth.
2.3 million of the most vulnerable people on Earth who have been locked in a open-walled prison with the nastiest terrorist group since 2006 as their captors. Watch on and say you got to stay in there and hang out with these criminals of Hamas. Saying I'm not going to sell out the women and children and people who are living there to these criminals, saying rather than letting the IDF wipe them out and take their land on, it's pretty harsh, isn't it?
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm not saying Nasrallah has done a lot of difficult, morally dubious things in his life. Absolutely, because
he's a terrorist. Leader. I mean, of course he has.
He's been leading.
But the fact that Israel won't even conceive of the idea of having a peace plan that involves Gaza not being destroyed by them, that's that's a good line to stand on, saying
Yeah.
no, I don't want to see 2.3 million people murdered by the Israeli Defense Forces in order to achieve peace in Lebanon.
And frankly, the world would be a significantly better place if more people than Hezbollah and the Houthis were actually standing up against this. But moving on from that, it is actually a crime in this country to display Nasrallah's face. And wow, that is a great indictment on the country we live in my view. Because we don't believe in free speech at this point, do we?
We've never had free speech in Australia.
Yeah,
but I mean,
an implied right to political free
that's
speech.
we don't have it. I mean, we get to go vote next weekend, and that's how I've applied political free speech. But yeah, look, not condoning our other side is saying we don't like to see people getting wiped out for the sake of somebody for. Netanyahu's grasps at power to make sure he doesn't get indicted and sent to jail for the crimes he committed while in power. And
let's remember, Netanyahu is only hanging on to power so he doesn't go to jail because he is a criminal. I mean,
I read some horrible articles about the outbreak from Gaza and into the Israeli territories last year on October 7th, and the atrocities carried out then. And all the time, all the people involved were saying, well, where is the Israeli army? Where is it? It started at 7:30 in the morning or 6:45 in the morning, and the Israeli army did not turn up for 12 hours or something at times, and saying, what were they doing? This is their whole point. Obviously, I think he was in cahoots by himself. Anyway.
But, I mean, October 7th, I mean, an enormous number of the Israeli casualties on that day were caused by the IDF coming in very heavy into situations.
Not heavy enough, when they should have been earlier.
Well, yeah, they should have had... Well, given that this has now turned into... And in particular, Netanyahu has just in the last week signed over petroleum exploration rights off the Gaza coast to... a bunch of companies. Yeah.
Which companies? Are they nice American companies? Or Saudi companies? That'd be an interesting question. Yeah. Saudi or American companies?
I do not have that knowledge. But anyway, that was bad. Now let's talk about the exploding pages, which...
That's pretty clever.
It was clever, but it was indiscriminate. And what I particularly loathed was that all the pro-Israeli media went like, this is the most clever and calculated attack ever. It's like, no, they blew up thousands of doctors and teachers because Hezbollah is a civil society organization that has an armed wing, a bit like Sinn Féin and the IRA. And we'll be getting to the Irish soon enough. It was clever to an extent, and as it came out at the first time, my response was, wow, if you could compromise their communications to the point that you owned all their pages, why would you blow them up? But it turns out that their compromise of the Hezbollah and Iranian communications is so complete they didn't need the pages. They could just use them to blow their thumbs off. What I found particularly distressing to me was all the Americans going, yeah, we got one back for 1983 when they blew up the Marine barracks. And it's just like, wow, for a start, that was nearly half a century ago.
Yeah, and most of the fighters in this conflict were not even born then. In fact, their grandparents might have been alive then, but not the members of Hezbollah these days.
Yeah, but also
because most of them are 18 and under type thing.
Yeah, but also it's like, what were the American Marines doing in Lebanon, and what were the Lebanese doing in Lebanon? Oh, the Lebanese live there, and the Marines didn't live there.
Do you remember when we did the M48 episode in the 1958 when they had their first invasion of Lebanon?
Yeah. Anyway, I
did love the idea of that first week of the Israelis going into Lebanon and everybody, all the media, trying to come up with different ways of saying it's not an invasion. It's a activity. It's a jaunt in the park. It's not an invasion of a sovereign nation by another nation. It's not that at all, because Lebanon is not Gaza. It is not under the control of the Israeli government. It is a sovereign nation, And yes, they have their own problems, and yes, they have their own issues of Hezbollah, but they are a sovereign nation with their own people doing their own things, and Hezbollah is part of that. It's not like it's a good thing, but people need to recognize that it's not a case of internal Israeli politics and management. It's invasion of another nation, just like the Russians into Ukraine.
Exactly like that. But with the exploding pages, this is a crossing of the Rubicon that we won't get back. I have so many Chinese-made devices in my house. It absolutely terrifies me that they could be made to explode at any given time.
And which ones are sitting closest to your bollocks right now?
It's just not close to my bollocks. It's starting a fire in the house that actually scares me most.
Right.
But I'd hate to get me bollocks blown off too. Anywho, I think we as humanity, we're going to enormously regret what they did there. But and then we get to the fact that the Hezbollah and Iran have had a total compromise of their communications, which is impressive to a point. But the fact that Thomas Friedman in the New York Times was posting articles saying, "Oh, in 20 minutes' time, Iran's going to launch these missiles," they are stuffed, and the mole hunts are going to kill an enormous number of good people, and the actual moles are probably going to scurry away, and that's sad in a general moral sense. But yeah.
All right, now before we get to the Irish
beer review,
we are definitely doing a beer review.
Yeah. So Rob, this jeverbeer.com lager, it tastes. It's just. I mean, it's a 500 ml can. It's
crisp bitterness, hoppy flavour, dry finish.
It's not great.
It's not, is it? I actually preferred the other one we were drinking before, which was the. Hang on, here we are.
Anyway, this one is okay, but the
Paulana Muncha Hell Munich Lager from Aldi. I actually prefer that better.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were drinking that before, so that's what we'll have to clean our palates after this one. Munich Lager, 1634. That's the problem. See, this one's only 175 years old. This one is 390 years old.
Although I know all of them have aluminium canning plants, so those aren't that old.
No.
But okay, moving on because I need to wee, so we're going to have to wrap this show up. I just want to be a huge shout out, and we've got it in the slideshow. The Israeli peacekeepers holding the line in southern Lebanon.
Irish peacekeepers.
Sorry, Irish peacekeepers. Jesus, what did I say? Yes, the Irish peacekeepers holding the line in southern Lebanon despite the Israeli threats. Now, I have some context from some Irish friends. They have this unit of Irish has been there, obviously not all of them, for 40 years. Literally, the kids in the villages get driven to school in the Irish APCs. So they are deeply integrated in these communities. 70 of them were on leave when the Israelis started demanding they withdraw, and they all came back from their leave to hold their positions.
I didn't think they could get back in.
Yeah, they got back in.
Oh, did they? Oh, well done. Well done. Well done, those people.
Yeah, but the point is that the Irish are white enough and English speaking enough that even the Israelis are knowing this is an actual problem for them, that these guys are refusing to leave so they can conduct their slaughters.
Yeah, they don't. So the whole point about UN observers is they observe when the Israeli Defense Forces carry out atrocities. And they don't like that idea of being observed when they carry out blowing up civilian populations. The peacekeepers have been shot by the Israelis in the last 2 days.
It's getting very hot.
When the Israelis said, well, there were bad guys near their compound, and so we had to shoot them. And while we were shooting the bad guys near the Irish compound, or the UN compound, we managed to hit a couple of Irish peacekeepers. So you got to say the Israelis are looking like they just want to shoot everything in there and don't care what they're going to do, whether it's UN peacekeepers, whether it's not peacekeepers, the observers.
I mean, it's the UNIFIL mission, but yeah.
Yeah, but they really don't like the idea of being under any sort of scrutiny from the outside world when they're carrying out the various atrocities, when they're invading a sovereign nation in order to deal with a problem that they don't want to solve themselves without the idea of wiping out Gaza, West Bank, and everything else that gives them more land.
The Israeli Minister for Finance, for God's sake, he's part of the cabinet, was just this week saying, we think the borders of Israel should include all of southern Lebanon, all of Jordan, parts of Egypt, parts of Saudi Arabia, parts of Syria. They're on a tear, and I
just want to give a shout out to the Irish peacekeepers who are doing their job.
They are doing their job. They are good guys.
Staying there, and thank you very much for
that. And also, I really appreciate that the Irish, as one generation removed victims of imperial colonialism, are just saying, "Nah, we're not doing that."
Yeah.
So good on them. Okay, moving on a little bit.
It's been that long?
Yeah.
Wow.
So
I've had a lot happening in the last month. So yeah.
As regular listeners of the show will know, we think NAFO, the North Atlantic Fellas Organization,
good on you, fellas,
have some jerkish tendencies, and one of them tried to assassinate Donald Trump.
And failed again.
He failed. And look, I'm not a fan of Donald Trump, but this is the problem with the frontier coming home. In that, Trump just wants this war to end, and as do I. I don't agree with Donald Trump on much, but I don't particularly want it to be a Putin victory. I'd actually like for Ukraine to get enough assistance to actually win the war, but no one wants to give them that.
No.
Anyway,
they'll do it in incremental steps, and just making sure that they can just push the line of what Vlad'll accepts until the Ukrainians win. But that will cost a lot more Ukrainian lives than actually giving them everything they need to win.
Yeah. Anyway, also, I want to note the NAFO jerks called me a pencil-necked dweeb. And as someone who weighs over 100 kilos, I find
this is no pencil neck.
I found it really hilarious to be called pencil neck. Like, if you're bigger than me, you've got some real health issues you need to be addressing. But anyway.
Do you even lift, bro?
Enjoy that, guys. And our last point before we go is the Israelis are now saying that Trophy, their active protection system on their tanks. Hey, we're talking about tanks, Rob.
Yeah, this is the Israeli tanks.
Yeah.
This is the
but Trophy is sold all around the world.
Yeah, but
Anyway, it's now got anti-drone capacity, so they've stopped it just looking for anti-tank missiles coming in at roughly the same height, and it looks higher, and
360-degree anti-drone at slow speeds, and so not Mark's 5 that the various anti-tank missiles come in at.
Yeah, but they zigzag a lot more. So anyway, I've always thought that active protection systems would get anti-drone. It seemed obvious. Similarly, what we talked about before with the Slinger system is one of those things that seems relatively obvious, but it's good they've worked it out. Now, getting back to the Tiger 2, before we go, the poll is currently giving a waste of resources.
It's turned around.
Yeah,
it was for a while. There was a good idea on for a better situation, but now it's turned around for a waste of resources. And wow, that's an interesting take on the situation. It was bad for a lot of situations, but it was very good for Nazi Germany because they didn't have the crews, they didn't have anything else, but they could have done it better, couldn't they, boys and girls? But it was a waste of resources is what the people have said. And
anywho, we want to thank everyone who's watched this. We want to thank everyone who's listening to this. Particularly want to thank Sasha Maggio for being a halftime interview. And folks, we really appreciate you, but this is roughly the point we wind things up.
Lovely.
Yeah. Okay.
Take care all. See you next month.